Well, Baya, it is good to be here with you. You are one of my favorite people. You are always laughing, always smiling. And one thing that you do is something that I try to do is I spend my life trying to entertain other people and trying to create situations and scenarios where other great people get to come together. And that's something that you've spent the last 10 years essentially doing and building a great network doing that.
It's my favorite thing in the world.
Well, you did a big event last New Year's Eve, and it's called the Secret SLC, Secret Society. Give us a little bit of, just so my audience can have an idea of kind of how cool your events can be or how cool your events are. Tell us what that was.
They're called Secret SLC, and the idea behind Secret is that they are invite-only curated events with an X factor. You know the theme of the event, and you know the dress code, and outside of that, you basically know nothing. So you find out location the day of, you don't know what you're getting into. It could be a 20-person dinner or a 600-person dance party. You know very, very little. And we've done some really fun events. This last year, we did a New Year's party for almost 1,000 people, actually, that we called it Mystere. It was a little Eyes Wide Shut, a little New World Order. It was really, really fun. And this year, I'm so excited. We're doing something completely different, curating a really small and intimate group. And I can't wait, but I can't say much else.
No, that's perfect. Well, that's kind of what makes it fun. I think there's a stimulus that gets excited when you don't know exactly what's going on. It adds a new emotion to the whole thing, a little bit of uncertainty. It probably helps those introverts get out of their comfort zone a little bit. They're thinking like, look, I don't have to have anxiety because I just don't know what this is going to be. And then by the time you're figuring it out, you're there, you're in the moment experiencing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And who doesn't want to be in on a secret? Right? It's always fun to be in on something that other people don't know about. And the reality, one of the fun things about this is as soon as you RSVP or get the invitation, your curiosity starts to peak. So if it's a month before, you're prepping for this for a month and you have no clue what you're prepping for. So that's also really fun.
Very awesome. Well, you got into this because you started, well, backing up even more, but you were a matchmaker and you were a relationship coach. You teach people about attraction. You've been on the news multiple times teaching women how to show up more in an attractive state. How did you get started in that field? What a cool thing to do with your job and with your life, but how did you get started doing that?
It all started with a reality TV show. How every good story starts. Just kidding. I was on The Real World way back when, and I remember thinking after I was on the show, I was like 21 when I was on that show, and I remember thinking afterwards, why did I do that? That was such a strange thing to do. Why did I want to do that? And one of the things that I kept asking myself was, okay, if I really cared about an interesting experience with 7 strangers, I would have signed up for Craigslist and gotten 7 random roommates. So clearly that's not what I was doing. There was something else driving me. And when I really started digging, I started realizing there was this real lack of understanding about myself and real lack of community, and I was craving it in any way I could. I could find it, and one of the ways for me all growing up was to be popular. The Real World was this signpost for me. It was sort of like a notch on my belt that said, oh cool, I'm popular. That's what that did for me.
Why is that we all have that innate thing where we want to be popular? Is that just because we want to know that we matter? Is that we want to be significant in some way? What is it that drives people to want to be popular or important?
I think significance is a big one. I think wanting to be seen is another one. And I find for myself that when I notice I'm doing things to get a reaction from people, there's some sort of lack of worth that I'm feeling in myself. So whether it's posting something on social media that I know is going to get a reaction, something like, here I am at this club in VIP, or here I am doing something that's really cool that most people can't do or aren't doing, and sheds a light into my life that other people don't really get that experience. I often find that I'm doing that. I'm not saying this is everyone, but for me specifically, I find that I'm doing that out of lack, out of really wanting assurance and validation from the outside in. And
it's a dangerous game. I mean, I know, one of my nieces posted on her Instagram, and she's like, tell me something you love about me. And I was like, oh no, like it's starting. She's trying to get validated through her stupid social media. And so I started kind of like trying to help her understand that you don't need anybody's approval for you to feel like you're enough or you're good enough. But that is one of those innate things we all have, right? We're not loved, we're not enough. And so we're all doing it, whether I'm posting a picture of the latest sporting event or whatever else, right? I mean, I'm trying to share the highlights of my life to show people that you can live an extraordinary life in any way, whatever that means to you. And so it is a fine line. I always feel like, I don't want to post this, but I do, because it really was like, I put so much effort into making this happen. I want other people to know that these things are possible, but doing it in a way where you're trying not to do it just for your own validation.
Yeah, and I think we're approval-seeking creatures. That's, I think, in a lot of people, it's innate. And what the great side of that is that the positive side of that is when we are seeking approval and when we're good at seeking approval, oftentimes we're good at connecting with people. The shadow side of that is that when we're seeking external approval all the time, then our moods are dictated by everybody else. Our worth is dictated by everybody else. Our decisions are based off of what other people think. And so our sense of self, my sense of Baya, who Baya is, gets put on the back burner. And all of a sudden, I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't really have a sense of self because my sense of worth has been created by everybody around me. And I find that often with chameleons. I find myself to be a chameleon as well. But that, just to circle back on why I started doing what I do is because I noticed the reasons I was doing things were all because of this lack, this inherent lack that I had in myself, my own self-worth. And that translated into just wanting to learn more about human connection in general. Romantic relationships, relationship with myself, relationship with my partner, relationship with my community. It became this umbrella for which my entire scope of work has now been built off of. One of the things that I did was matchmaking. I've been a dating coach. I now host these events that are really made to connect you to the space in yourself that may be the space that you don't show everybody else. Like the edgier side of you. The side that may not be.
Yeah, I love that about Halloween, for example, right?
Totally.
People
Great
actually
example.
get to put on a costume, they get to be a role or a figure that they want to play on a regular basis sometimes, and they get to just be. They get to be themselves with no apologies, no shame, because everybody is dressed up as somebody else.
Absolutely. I just had my first experience at Burning Man this year, and it was so interesting.
Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, Burning Man it's so crazy. It's just a spectacle. Like the fact that Burning Man is something that exists on this planet is insane. And for those of you who have never been or don't know what it is, it's art and it's music, and it can be a 24-hour concert fest for you, or it could be a yoga festival. If you want to find grilled cheese at 3 in the morning, there is somebody serving grilled cheese. Like it's anything.
Well, and it's in the middle of the desert in Nevada.
It's the 3rd largest city in Nevada for that week, 70,000 people. And the idea, one of the core tenets of Burning Man is to be who you are, to be totally authentic and have that radical, authentic version of you be the person who shows up. And in my small way with the events, it's exactly what we do. It's like, who are we when we get the monkey mind to go out the window and we can be whoever we want? Who does that person get to be? And what does that person want? Because I find often we don't get to let that person shine. Very, very rarely. Very rarely. Maybe in our relationships, but sometimes not even there.
And why is it so important that person be able to shine?
Well, I mean, think about it. Our cravings, the things that we desire, oftentimes they're taboo. Oftentimes these are not things that are allowed in everyday society. And then because they're taboo, because they're not talked about, we feel like we're the only people who want those things. And then we feel alone, and then it spins off into this whole other feeling isolated, feeling like we're the only people with the problem, and somehow we're wrong for that.
There's something wrong with you or something weird about you, right? Where
Exactly.
in reality, it's like the predicted behavior.
If we only could shine a little bit of light on those taboo topics, on the behaviors that most people, whether or not they're fantasizing about them, they may be living them out, but they're just not that weird. And that's part of what I want to normalize is the things that feel taboo, the things that make us feel alone, and bringing them into experiences that are really fun in a safe container.
Well, you're very good at that. We went out one time to I don't even know what that was, like a venue, I guess you would call it, where in one room there's a dude reading Edgar Allan Poe poetry, in the other room there's somebody giving psychic readings, the other room there's like a bunch of dead animal skulls everywhere, and it was, people country dancing in another room. It was one of the most bizarre nights ever, but it was so awesome in every way, right? And I think it really taught me in that moment, like there's nothing that's right or wrong about a situation or a party. It's simply getting yourself to feel a little bit uncomfortable and then understanding that, oh, this actually isn't that uncomfortable at all.
Yeah, well, and how fascinating to meet who you are on the other side of discomfort. That's really cool. That's the edge. That's the edge that's so fascinating to me. And I feel like, that's again, my body of work is around that edge, around meeting the discomfort. That's the juice. That's where the good stuff happens.
So give us one or two examples from your party last year of something that maybe the average Joe would have been a little uncomfortable with, that you purposely put into the party just to help people get this experience.
Jimmy, if I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Wait, didn't you put out a big video about it?
No, that video was actually
Okay.
never released. I just sent it to you. But yeah, no, a couple of things that would have made people uncomfortable. Oh boy. There was a little bit of nudity, pushing the edge there. I would say the performance factor is, here's what I will say, because it's hard for me to give things away, because taken out of context, it can feel like these are crazy. When they're edgy, but they're not like...
No, you guys actually are weird.
Yeah, I know. And the first thing I throw out is nudity. It's like, yeah, that probably wasn't the best thing to say. Here's what I would say. At some of these events, you don't know who is a guest and who is talent. You don't know that. I think I'm going to leave it at that.
All right, no, that's fair enough. So let's back up. You were so you went on Real World, and then you decide, okay, I need to study. I want to dive into all this human connection stuff. And then at what point did you start becoming a matchmaker, and how did that come about?
I moved back to Salt Lake City in my early 20s, and I came back here single, but as we know in Utah, people get married a little younger. And I realized the dating scene was terrible. I was having such a hard time meeting people because everybody I knew was married. And so I was like, well, I know how to solve this problem. I'm going to start hosting events for myself. I'm going to start hosting dating events and singles mixers and speed dating, and see if I can help make the dating scene cooler. And for the people who aren't married at 24, maybe they can find a match. And so I started hosting these events, and people started meeting each other. And for the people who didn't meet somebody, I was now building a network of single people, and so people would ask me if I had anybody that I could set them up with. So then I started matchmaking, but the problem here was I would set people up, and what would happen over and over and over again is I would have somebody call me, and the guy would call and he would be like, that was the best date, I can't wait to go out with her again. And the woman would call and she would be like, I never want to see that guy again. That was a terrible first date. And I would be like, where is the disconnect?
Was it always the guy that was naive?
99% of the time. And I don't think that's the case all the time, by the way. But for me, 99% of the time it would be the guys being like stoked, and the girls, for whatever reason, the women coming back and being like not stoked. And so I started saying to the men, if you want to be set up, then you have to hire me as a coach before you can hire me as a matchmaker. And so what I would do is I would set these guys up, and I would go on the dates with them without the person I set them up knowing. So I would sit on the other side of the room, I would listen in on the dates, I would watch their body language, because at this point I was studying NLP, body language, positive psychology. I was studying all of the psychology of love, so I had a really good understanding just by watching them, not even by listening.
I'm just picturing you like in the back of the car, like under a blanket or something, just listening in on this date and just
Totally, I did the weirdest stuff. I mean, I would have them link up to I would listen in on their date while they had their phone recording. Weird things. I tested every weird thing you could think of to see if I could get these guys getting better results. Finally started, coming up with a process that worked, and then these guys started seeing better results. And so then I started becoming known as a coach and a matchmaker more and more, and then started coaching women, and then hosting seminars and workshops and speaking and seduction classes and you name it.
Well, we'll get more into the seduction classes and all that stuff. I think that's interesting. People always want to hear different, insights into those kinds of things. But did it work for you? Did you end up finally meeting some guys worth dating here in the dating scene?
I have had my fair share of boyfriends, yes. Yeah, in fact, I was engaged recently, and then the engagement got broken off, which I'm totally fine talking about. But I met plenty of good guys, and I say that in part because every city, it doesn't matter where I go, in every city, without fail, somebody says this city is the hardest city to date in.
There's no
good guys here. There's nobody here. It's the hardest city, and they'll give me X, Y, and Z reason. I hear that in Utah all the time. I was one of the people to say that when I came back.
Well, the thing I love about you, though, is a lot of womenists, particularly, I'll say, guys too, I guess, they get in this mindset where they're like, oh, the dating scene sucks, dating sucks, all these different things. There's no good women, there's no good guys. And they kind of fester in their own dismay or whatever, the despair. Instead, what you did, which is what I appreciate so much, is you took action. You immediately said, you know what, I'm going to fix it. I don't know where these guys are. I had this saying, the host gets the most. That's why I love throwing parties. Like, you can go to 1 million parties and no one ever knows you're there. You throw a kick-ass party and everybody's like, okay, who threw this party? And all of a sudden 20, 30, 40 new people, right? And so that's what you did. That's, same thing whenever if I ever get in this stage where I just feel like I'm in a rut, I'll literally just decide, I'm like, okay, what need does the public have? How can I serve? How can I be an asset to other people? And without fail, it usually revolves around some kind of charity party or something like that. And I always end up finding the most amazing people that I attract into my life. And so I think that's the principle that you took is, I'm taking action, I'm gonna go meet some amazing people.
Absolutely, and to be honest, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm in a relationship, and my boyfriend and I are long distance, and I'm spending more and more time in the city that he lives in, and I've been thinking about this. Okay, so how am I going to build my network from scratch? I know nobody there. What am I going to do? One of the things that I've done is I've gotten on, well, let me back up. One of my priority is to meet good girlfriends. I love running around with a thick chick crew. I love it. So I've been like, how am I going to meet people? So I get on Bumble BFF. But that takes a lot of one-on-one dates, even if they're friend dates, that takes a lot of time. We know that in dating, in real dating and in friend dating, in about 5 minutes if you're going to...
Does that actually work? Like you literally go on a date? Because I think of the movie, I think it's called I Love You Man, when he's getting married or whatever.
Yeah.
He needs to find a best man, so he starts going out with dudes to get a best friend. Is that literally what you go do on Bumble BFF?
Well, so this is why I even tell you this story. What I'm doing is, instead of going on a bunch of one-on-one dates, because that sounds like it's going to eat up a ton of my time, and chances are 90% of the people that I meet, I'm probably not going to end up being really close with, but there are going to be one or two who I hopefully, fingers crossed, really enjoy. So I'm hosting a dinner.
By the way, those are about the same numbers that guy gets on Bumble or Tinder.
Just trying to reflect back for you. So I'm hosting a dinner for all of my Bumble BFF matches when I get back, so that I can meet everybody at the same time. And even if I don't necessarily match with them, they can potentially find friends in this whole group that they wouldn't have necessarily met.
I'm going to do that with all my Tinder matches.
Yeah, it's perfect. Oh, I thought that would go over really well.
We did. What was the pool party we threw for the 4th of July?
And they had all the girls
we had about 20 guys and 115 girls.
Oh my goodness.
You know what though? a lot of them become best friends. It's actually a joke, but it's true as well. Like literally they all pocket it off. They honestly, I think in the last week I've seen 3 or 4 girls that met at that party that's like my BFF or blah, blah, blah. They end up becoming friends. So you just create an atmosphere where people are comfortable and you never know what comes from it.
Yeah, and meanwhile you have 150 women to pick to be your potential girlfriend. Who wants to be your next girlfriend?
So wait, so you're throwing a big event when you get back. And you're just going to bring them all together?
Yeah, it's not even a big event, it's a dinner. I'm doing
Okay.
a dinner for all of them. I'll probably have them fill out some sort of questionnaire that'll give me a little more information about them and then curate it so I'm seating people next to each other so that hopefully they meet people. And then basically I'm doing this, I'm just picking and choosing and cool, I want you. And that's how I feel like I'm almost back at square one again, like when I moved back to Salt Lake in my early 20s and was trying to figure out a date. That's what and so I'm, now older, wiser, and doing it for friends.
No, it's perfect. Well, and so when you started matchmaking, you started helping these guys. Give us a couple of the principles. What are some of the things that guys were doing that they were doing wrong that you helped them to fix as you're listening in on these dates?
One of the things that I find that we do when we're nervous is we talk a lot and we don't ask a lot of questions. And it's not by any fault of our own. It's like we're in our heads, we talk a lot, and we all know that we all like talking about ourselves. One thing that I saw over and over again is that the men who were failing were not asking questions. Every single time, without fail, it was like they would rather have a 7-minute pause than ask a question. And I don't believe that was because they wanted the pause, it was just because they were so in their heads and they couldn't quite come up with whatever they were trying to come up with, and so they would word vomit over the entire dinner or date, and then by the end the woman was exhausted. She didn't say a word and she was exhausted.
It's funny you say that. When I was in my young 20s, I think that was me. I was the guy that was like that uncomfortable silence. I couldn't live with it, right? And how I learned not that was okay to have that silence is I volunteered for the Big Brother Big Sister program, and they gave me this 8-year-old that didn't like to talk. And
Perfect.
we'd go out 3 times a month, twice a month, and go do something. We'd go to Nickel Cave or go sledding or something, right? And it was funny because the kid didn't really talk, and so I didn't try to pull stuff out of him. We would just sit there, drive in silence, and I would, radio was on sometimes, we'd go, and he talked a little, but what was funny is the end of the day, or not a date, whatever you call it, when you're, the hangout, right?
Yeah.
He was so excited, and every time his mom would come, like, I just thank you so much. He's so lit up. He just said that was the best night he's had in months. Like, he's so excited to go hang out again. And we were just, literally, to me, I was like, oh, and I was like, you know what? Some people just need to relax and be in their own space sometimes. And so now I've really learned to appreciate, like, if you have something to add or something to contribute to a conversation, then throw it in. If not, let other people have the opportunity to either sit there and be in their own thoughts or relax, or let them shine as well. And it's amazing how much more likable you tend to come off.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the person who does the less talking, the least amount of talking wins. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I would add is that the quality of your questions really matters. Mm-hmm. Because how many first dates have you gone on where the questions are the same, the what do you do, that doesn't give you any room for being very interesting.
No, I think somebody taught me, a friend of mine, he's like an attraction coach, he's a good friend of mine, and he said, you gotta ask questions that invoke emotion.
Always, that's what I was just gonna say. You always want to get out stories.
Right.
Because when you invoke emotion, all of a sudden they start to feel it, and then that completely connects you. Then they feel a more intimate connection with you without you doing anything.
So if somebody's just like listening to this and they're thinking, well, I'm just not very good at telling stories, or I don't have any interesting stories to tell, what are some ideas or hints or clues that you can give them of how to invoke that story or start a story that's interesting?
Well, first of all, I would say do not come up with the story on the fly. If that is you, then it's a really good indicator to be thinking about stories. And it sounds bad, but it's just a smart move to have some stories in your back pocket that you can just throw out there when somebody brings up X, Y, and Z, and you've got a story that's going to have laughter, a story that shows you in a power position, a story that puts you in a vulnerable position, a story that, if you can have a few of those in your pocket, You tell a great one about going to Tony Robbins, actually.
Which story? I
tell so many stories
to Tony
about when Tony was on stage and he asked the men to get on stage. That's a great story.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had been told by my friends, look, it's never attractive for a man to dance in a feminine way to women. It doesn't attract them. It can be fun, it can be funny, but it doesn't attract a woman. And so Tony was teaching attraction at his date with Destiny, and he had the women get up first and dance in their feminine energy, and it was beautiful. And you pick which one was the most feminine, and then he was teaching the women how to show up in a feminine energy. Then he says, all right, guys, get up here and dance in a masculine energy. And I knew that like a guy dancing in a masculine energy is just him sitting there kind of being in the moment a little bit, mostly letting the woman dance on him, right? And so I'm like, oh, I'm gonna win this. So I go on the stage in front of 2,000 people. There's about 30 of us that go up. And a couple of guys are ripping their shirt off and they're dancing around. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I got this. I'm just kind of like in a good vibe and a good moment, a good energy, and I'm kind of feeling it, kind of doing some of the motions that actually Tony does. And it was funny because I was like, okay, he has a vote. He's like, who is the most masculine? And I was one of the top like 3, and I'm feeling pretty good. My ego's, getting hit a little bit. And all of a sudden he goes, you know who's the most masculine of all these men? None of them. Because a masculine man wouldn't come up here and try to prove himself to a bunch of strangers. And I was like, oh, he got me right in the gut. He just nailed me.
Oh, that's great. And why that is a great story is because, first of all, it's hilarious. Second of all, it's self-deprecating. And that can actually be used as a really great tool if you are if and only if you are somebody who is otherwise really confident. Self-deprecating humor is a really sensitive one, because if you're not that confident and you don't own the room, if you're not an alpha, that can actually be a total turnoff. But
yeah, it's the difference between, I tell that story, I'm not embarrassed about that story,
no.
Right? That's hilarious. I totally got owned in that moment, but at the same time, I saw it for what it was. It's not a lack of confidence, it was just like, oh my gosh, I still had things to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I learned that when I did stand-up comedy, I did stand-up for about 3 years, and I usually just define, the audience laughed, they had a good time. When you bomb doing stand-up comedy, there's no lonelier or worse feeling in the world. So you really want to learn, what did I do wrong or different this time? And I'll never forget, it was the worst bomb of my entire career. Not one person there was laughing. And what happened, I thought about it afterwards, and I talked to a few other comics. Jason Hewlett, who I've had on the show, was there, and I went up to him after. I said, dude, how did I lose him? And he goes, well, there's a secret. He goes, you're usually very good when you get up on a stage, it being a little bit self-deprecating, making fun of yourself first. And he goes, if you can make fun of yourself first, where they feel like, okay, this guy doesn't think he's better than us, then you can go after other people. He goes, you went straight after the other people, you just came off like a jerk. And that's where you lost the audience. So they're like, I'm not gonna laugh at this guy, he's a jerk. He goes, usually you tell a funny joke, this joke or this joke or this joke, where you're making fun of yourself, and then they're on your side. And so I learned very early on, people, they don't care how cool or special you are in a way, they just care how you make them feel about themselves when you're with them.
Absolutely, absolutely, which is why it's so important to ask great questions. So to come back to the initial question, if you feel like you are having a hard time coming up with stories, your life, no matter how boring you may feel it is there are so many interesting pockets in there, and why they may not feel interesting to you is because you may have told the story over and over again, or you just know your life so well that you feel like, because you're the one in it, that it's not that interesting. I talk about my time on the real world, and for me, I lived it. It doesn't really seem like anything. It's like, oh, that was a blip on my radar. It was strange. But for people who have watched the show their entire lives, right, literally grew up with that show. It was one of the first reality TV shows after Cops. They're like, holy cow, you were they want to hear all about it. And for me, I'm like, oh, you want details of that? And that's one example, but there are millions of examples that may feel simple or mundane or not that interesting to you that actually to other people are really interesting. And I would say, think about, and I bet you have some really good feedback on this too, Jimmy, is think about things where you are the winner, things where you're showing, so a story where you're showing off, but it can't come off like that. It's gotta come off. Just like we've talked about, it's got like the humble brag. And showing people that you love community, love family. There are ways that you can when you start thinking about, okay, so what do people like in a human being?
Well, I think the way that I tell people is there's certain things that are attractive in a man especially.
Oh, yeah.
And protector of loved ones, successful risk taker, healthy emotions. So if you can tell a story that maybe mixes this in there, right? Leader of men, like these different things. You know, if you lead the men, the women will follow, they say, right? These different things where you can tell a story. So when I tell that story about Tony Robbins, like, okay, the dude is putting himself out there. He goes to a Tony Robbins event, right? He got on the stage in front of 2,000 people. That's an adventurous spirit. He has healthy emotions because he got slammed and he can laugh about it. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, that's an attractive. That's why that story to a woman can be an attractive story, to use an example. I will say one thing that guys tend to do, we're more logically brained, where women are more emotional. And so guys tend to want to tell all the details. Skip all the boring details. Like, get to the emotional parts of the story. Skip every time you, like, guys will be like, yeah, so I went to, instead of saying like, I went to the W Hotel or something, they'd say, okay, so I'm walking to the doors and it's like these roundabout doors, and they start telling you all of like these stupid details. You're like, dude, the juice of the story. And when in doubt, talk about marriage, talk about dating, and talk about something exciting, because women love those topics always.
Yeah, absolutely. And things that portray attractive qualities to women, like protection, providing, confidence, things like that, safety, those are all really great things to seed in when you're talking to a woman, just because those are qualities that women are looking for.
Would you ever tell a guy, like, if he doesn't have a cool story, maybe he heard a cool story, to use somebody else's story as if it was himself, or you always want to be authentic with
I mean, listen, it depends on what your goal is. That's what I would say.
If you're just trying to get laid.
Yeah, truly though, like I think it's useful practice. And if you don't have intentions of being in a relationship with somebody, then it could be, then fine.
What I always tell people is, I say, tell the story this way. Say, my friend tells this story, and then tell their story.
Well, then there's some truth
Then
to it, right? I
right.
don't think you should flat out lie, and I think there's a time and a place for practice.
That's fair enough. So for women, because you've been on the news multiple times, they have you on all the time talking about what women can do to show up more attractive. What are a couple of those key things that you teach women in order to show up in a more attractive state?
Well, for men, and I should also say, I don't know, I mean, I don't totally know your audience, but I know we're not, I'm talking about a heteronormative relationship right now.
Sure.
And
just assume if we say men and woman that it's masculine, feminine,
totally,
right? That is
exactly, totally. So for men, what they look for, and you can probably attest to this, is playfulness. They want somebody sexy. They want somebody nurturing and independent. And those are 4 qualities that you can show to a man in a number of ways. And so when you think about building attractiveness, there are a couple of things that you want to think about. Initial attractiveness happens at a glance, right? You're physically attracted to somebody. That's step 1. And that can actually be curbed by the other things that I just talked about. But so you're physically attracted to somebody, then there's got to be some sort of value that you, or at least perceived value that you provide. Then there's also got to be perceived challenge that you provide, and then chemistry. And though that's the winning combo for attractiveness, you don't necessarily have to have all of those. That's, again, winning combo. You don't have to have all of those off of the bat, but if you're just hot, and I find with beautiful people in general, not just men or women, beautiful people in general, if they have grown up beautiful, they've been beautiful their entire lives, they're some of the most boring people I've ever met in my entire life, because they've never had to build social skills because looks have gotten them by.
Well, there's an old saying, show me the most attractive woman in the world, and if she doesn't have anything else, I'll show you the guy that's sick of having sex with her.
Oh, yeah.
And me and my friends always say, it's like, you can deal with just attraction alone from physical looks for about 2 weeks, and then you're pretty much done.
Yeah.
That lasts about 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's true. And so what are things that you can do if we're talking about women, I just feel like this pertains to men and women, but as a woman, if you're thinking about where you can add perceived value, what is your lifestyle? What does your lifestyle look like? And how can you, and if you're feeling right now, like you're like, oh, I don't know, I feel kind of boring, I don't really have a lot going on. Well, then that is step number 1, first of all, before you want to date. Because if you don't have anything going on and the person you date ends up being your primary purpose, I promise you that relationship will fail. Even if it lasts, it's not going to be pretty.
So a question I love to ask on a first date, and it's kind of my subtle way of finding out a little bit of the depth of the woman, is I say, what are you most proud of in your life? What achievement are you most proud of in your life? And if they can't give me something that they've done that they're proud of, it can be something even that like you would never expect it to be, right? But I want to know that this woman has a little bit of depth, that she's put a little bit of thought into it, and that she actually wants to go out and achieve, like design her life to be incredible and amazing life.
Absolutely. And it can be something as big as, value can be as something as big as what you're talking about, a really, really powerful and impactful moment, or something as small as you play kickball on weekends, right? And that's what you do, and you have a life outside of your potential mate. And if a man can see that, because listen, men are scared of clinging. They're scared of somebody who is going to be totally dependent on them for all of their emotional and physical and every other need.
I would say a healthy man.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
There are men that are absolutely will take your clinginess, but that's probably not the type of partner you're
Great. Yes, 100%, 100%. So if you don't have anything going on, create a life for yourself, because once you start creating that life, you also draw in way more kinds of people than you would originally. The other thing I would say is, when it comes to challenge, men think they want you to say yes to everything. They think they want you to say yes to all the dates. They don't want you to say yes to all the dates. They don't. There is something different about creating rapport, which is important. Rapport is important, but there is something, I would say, even more important or equally as important about breaking that rapport. That can show up as saying no to a date, especially if they want to go out last minute. Because at that point, you can show them that you have value also by already having plans. You have a life outside of that by already having plans, even if you don't already have plans. Where was I? I lost my train of thought.
No, you're just saying that men don't necessarily want a woman to always be available.
Totally. So it can...
And vice versa, because the number one quality of an alpha male is he's going to be busy. He's just actually does have a busy life.
Yeah, so whether it's, if it starts out as a lie, then make sure it becomes not a lie. If you don't have anything going on, please create something for yourself that gives you more value in your life in general. That it will give you so much more confidence as a human being to have your own life, your own goals, your own interests, your own friend group. I mean, not having that, and the thing is, people lose that in relationships. That is, and so if you can be the one in your relationship, no matter who you are, if you can be the one to make sure that you are taking control of bringing in space and breath into your relationship, huge win. If one person, it's likely that one person in your relationship is going to want to spend more time with the other. If you can be the person to break away, a coach of mine says, she calls this the inhale and the exhale. So the inhale is when you're together, you're loving on each other, you're feeling really, really connected, you're spending lots of time together, you go on trips together. The exhale is the space apart, and you can tell that you need the exhale when you all start getting a little edgy with each other, you bite at each other, you're starting to see one another get on your nerves, on each other's nerves. If you can be the one to note that and to take intentional space away from each other, whether that's just going to a coffee shop and working away for the day, or whether it's literally taking a separate trip from one another, if you can be the one to take control of that in your relationship, I don't care which gender you are, you win.
But one thing that you talk about in your TED Talk, the cure for loneliness, the simple cure for loneliness, you talk about having rituals and having things that you go do to be busy. So you give the example of, you have your girlfriends, right? That you go out every Monday, you go with your girlfriends, you have a girls' night, no matter what else is going on. Talk to us as an audience kind of a little bit about your talk and some of those things that you can do to create rituals, and then also kind of tie it back into how you do cure loneliness.
Yeah, well, I would say ritual can often feel like something religious. We often tie it back to spirituality or religion, but when I think about ritual, I think about it being something that you can create in your life. It can be so simple, but that you do it intentionally and on a recurring basis. So the example that you just gave, one of the things that I do is I have a girls' night, and it's so important, and I do it every Monday night, and it's really easy when I get into a relationship. And to be honest, now that I'm in a long distance relationship, it's much harder to keep that, and so I'm needing to find new rituals. But when I'm in town, Monday nights are my time with my girlfriends. It's so easy, and I've seen it done with the girls in this group, in fact. When somebody gets into a relationship, to one Monday you're going to go out on a date, the other Monday you're going to, and slowly but surely you lose that connection.
Well, I think people, they forget, I have friends that do the same thing, and they want to be with their new partner. I get it, but you want to remain and keep being the person that person fell in love with. And so when you start losing those little parts of you, right? If you quit going to girls' night or quit hanging out with the guys when they're going out and doing fun things, you're losing a part of what she fell in love with or what he fell in love with in the first place.
Absolutely. And one of the things that keeps creating desire in a relationship is distance. Mm-hmm. So that's why you have to be intentional about building in the distance, the exhale, as my coach calls it. You have to be intentional about building in that distance when you're in a relationship, especially if you're living together, because it's not already built in for you. And we want to spend time together. So built-in distance it's one of the most important things that you can do to keep attraction alive in your relationship. But I talk about ritual being so important because, and building in ritual now where things are going well, where you don't need them necessarily. Because when things hit the fan, if you don't already have built-in ritual, it's so much harder to create it when you are in despair, when you're at the depths of hell, when you are just going through something so tragic, whether it's a miscarriage or a divorce or a death or a breakup, whatever it is. If you have built-in rituals before things get crazy, which inevitably they will for everybody, then if you build those in before, then you have something to go back to that keeps you grounded and that connects you back to community, which we all crave. Mm-hmm. We all crave it. And that's basically what the talk is about. It gives way more examples of ritual and goes much more in depth into ritual. But
if somebody is feeling lonely, somebody's just had a breakup, we'll say, or whatever else, and they're just like, don't even want to crawl out of bed, the thought of going on a date just makes them cringe. What is the best way for them to get back on their feet? I mean, obviously, if you're not in that situation yet, set up the rituals, right? Like me and my friends, we have our fantasy football league, and it's hilarious. It's 12 best friends. One of them plays in the NFL. Several very successful business guys. A couple of guys that are a little bit younger, just more free-spirited. Everything's a little bit different. But when we are on that thread, it's become a year-round thing. Anybody has news to share, it hits the thread. If you find a hilarious meme, it's hitting the thread. If some opportunity comes up that you want the other guys to be a part of, it hits the thread. And it creates this atmosphere. And I know like the guys in the league that are married or the guys in the league that are entering relationships, their wives and girlfriends love it because they see how much joy is brought to the guy and how it's just nice to know like, my guy has some really healthy friendships with other dudes that he doesn't need to me to be that role in his life. I can just be me and do what I want to do.
Absolutely. And rituals can serve different purposes. Some rituals serve the purpose of community. Some rituals serve the purpose of coming back to yourself, self-development. Rituals, some go back to your health. I mean, it's you can have rituals for anything. I focus on rituals that create connection just because that's what I study. But
well, it's funny. I have two rituals that I just am realizing as you're talking. One is I release 2 podcast episodes per week, but it's forced me to go out and network. It forces me to go on these appointments. It forces me to stay on top of this because I have deadlines. I have if I just don't put one out, everyone will be like, hey, what happened, right? The other one is I throw a client party once a month. And so once a month, I'm planning a party, I'm calling my friends, I'm getting all these things put together, and it's become rituals in my life where it's expected, and it helps me keep all my network, all my connections together.
Absolutely.
So I was asking the question, I kind of went around about it a little bit, but so if you are feeling lonely, you don't have, maybe your rituals aren't as strong as they should have been or whatever else, what's the next best thing you can do to get out of that bad spot?
Well, I would say that loneliness is not reserved for the socially isolated. It's not reserved for the people who are physically alone. I have been lonelier in my life when I have been, quote unquote, the most popular I've been. So I just also want to put that in the conversation as well, that there is the loneliness is an epidemic, and it's challenging because in the US especially, our culture is pretty isolating, right? We live in family units. We don't live in communities. When you look at the happiest communities in the world, these are people who live communally.
Mm-hmm.
They live with their communities. They raise their kids together. That's why in part religions with community are so fantastic, because they have a built-in system for communal raising your kids. That in and of itself is so, the fact that we do this as a family unit is kind of crazy. Like a single family, that's crazy. And then you think about single parents, I mean, kind of going on a tangent here, but anyway, I just want to say that loneliness is a total epidemic. And so if you're feeling lonely and you have family and you have friends and you have all of the reasons why you quote unquote shouldn't feel lonely, you're not alone. You are not alone. I would say one of the things to think about is really coming back to yourself and giving yourself the thing that you need. I think often especially when we're going through breakups, it's easy to isolate when the thing that we need to do is reach out, because there's shame, there's guilt, there can be a number of emotions that make it really, really hard to reach out. One of the things that helped me the most going through the loneliest time in my life, which was a breakup with my fiance that just happened recently, was giving myself time, the space that I needed by myself, and then reaching out when I felt like I needed to reach out. It was like, so if you can figure out ways to build connection with whether it is one person or a group of people, the reality is we do not need many people. We need a couple.
From an outsider's view, if you think your friend is lonely, they do want time to themselves sometimes. What's the best way to approach it to let them know you are available for them without being pushy or overstepping the time when they want to be alone?
Well, I think first of all, inviting them places. I think one of the worst
even if they're saying no, just keep inviting.
Yeah, I mean, might as well. What is it? No harm, no foul. One of the things that I find, especially in the grieving process, if we're talking about healing, if we're talking about going through a really challenging time, one of the things that I find as somebody who is on the other side, as a friend, that we often do that is not helpful is saying something like, hey, if you need anything, just let me know, I'm here. Right? That puts the onus on the other person who probably doesn't have the energy to reach out. Probably and it feels like they could be, it feels like it's going out of their way to put an imposition on you, when that's not what it's doing, right? As somebody who gets asked for something, we know that when we get to give, it feels really good. But as the person asking for help, it can feel like we're really putting pressure on somebody else. It can be really hard. One of the things that Sheryl Sandberg, who she's at Facebook, and she lost her husband, and she has come up with a program called Option B, and it's a book also, and in the book she talks about one of her friends going through something in the hospital, and instead of saying, hey, can I get you anything, literally showing up with a meal and being like, hey, I have the meal, I'm in the lobby, if you need it, I'm here.
Yeah, I had an experience with a friend not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, and I said, hey, here's what we're doing, I've already bought tickets, coming with me. I knew he would not reach out, he's not the type that's going to say, but I know that he needs his friend there, right? And I just said, come on, you're coming with me. And he's like, okay, great. And then when we were done, I said, hey man, just appreciate spending the time with you. Like, I wanted to hang out with him so bad. I knew he would probably needed me there, but he was never going to ask me. And when I texted him, he texted me back and he's like, you'll never know how much it means this time that you've, put into just seeing me and being around. And I remember, as I got the text, I'm like, it's so funny because he's never going to reach out to me. And if I were to say, dude, reach out if you need anything, I'll never hear from him. That's just how it is. And I'm totally okay with that, because I understand that my job as his friend is to put the effort into just being like, hey, I got the tickets, let's go do this.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, we're making this happen, I'll be there in this time.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Well, I do want to, before we get out of here, a couple other questions that people have surrounding matchmaking, attraction, all these things. If they want to get more information from you, you have so much material out there. Where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, bayavoce.com is my website. BAYAVOCE.com.
All right, awesome. Well, you've been great. This has been so much fun. Thank you again.
Thanks, Jimmy.